So I have a little problem with that. Seems like we are using the wrong mic also.
Can you hear me?
Here we are with the right video also on your side.
You can hear me?
Okay, so Leo Zagami, live from Palm Springs, California, the Leo Zagami Show with Dr. Paul Cottrell, Saturday, the 18th of September, 2021. Paul, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
But you can't hear, I can hear you. No, I can't hear you. That's the problem.
You can't hear me?
Able to, let's see if I can hear you. Try again.
Testing.
That's
testing.
it, testing. Okay, after a little bit of technical problems, we are on the air, 2 minutes past the hour on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network with our friend Darrell on Aftermath FM from 10 to 12 for our weekly rundown of all the latest news. So let's see what's going to happen here. I'm also going live now. I'm joining also Facebook, YouTube, and it seems like we are having a lot of platforms where we are broadcasting at the moment, Paul.
That's great.
So what's happening on your side?
I've just been busy with studying, with medical school and working on my research paper. I've been analyzing the cytokine data from that rat experiment that I was telling you about earlier. Okay. But it's been pretty busy on my end. I did a show with Mike Adams, and the last I looked, it reached over 20,000 views, talking about some of the things that we talked about in 2 shows ago, dealing with antibody-dependent enhancement, dealing with boosters when you have an over-reliance of boosters, what happens to your immune system, the Hoskins effect, and the potentiality of a worse pandemic in 5 or 6 years because of the Hoskins effect.
What is basically also what the Dr. Malone seems to be saying, in a way.
Right. Dr. Malone is focusing more on antibody-dependent enhancement. And so it's what I was discussing in Mike's show was a little bit of a hybrid between Malone and Bosch.
Oh, okay. I'm still having some problems in connecting with a couple of my channels here with the video. So I'm kind of like working on it. And now we seem to be finally solving that problem too. So here we are live from Palm Springs, California, also on Facebook and YouTube with Dr. Paul Cottrell on the other side. And Dr. Paul Cottrell was, of course, keeping me updated with all his latest experiments and also with his latest interviews. You said just a moment ago you spoke with Mike Adams in a very interesting interview, but also you did an interview with Dr. Malone. Now, Dr. Malone this week has also made an interview with a dear friend of mine down in Rome called Jules from Church Militant, in which he kind of planted a seed there for, I think, an impossible realization. I mean, he is asking the Pope to give him some attention and to rethink his support. Dr. Malone is the one who has created these mRNA vaccines. Is that the case?
He was part of the researchers that invented the messenger RNA platform. That's correct. Okay. He dealt with the making of the molecule, the messenger RNA molecule, but there were other researchers that dealt with the lipid nanoparticle, and so it was a team of researchers, but he was pivotal in the synthesis of a large messenger RNA molecule.
Well, this week we have a lot of news, especially what happened with the FDA yesterday. So I think we should focus immediately on what happened with this FDA panel that rejected the proposal made by the Biden administration for a booster. This was a virtual meeting by the FDA. It took place on September the 17th. Some of the things that were said during this virtual meeting, which I'm going to play for those who are following me on this side. But of course, you know more about me because you have a medical training. What do you think is substantially the most important part of this meeting that took place yesterday?
There's two parts. They were basically saying that they didn't feel at this moment in time the data warrants pushing boosters for most of the population. They did state that the evidence is suggesting that individuals that have low titers that are 65 and up or immune compromised should get a booster. So those were the two big takeaways from it.
Yes, but there was also some, reading and also following the virtual meeting on YouTube because it was broadcasted. I noticed that there was also some talk about the side effects of the vaccines.
Right.
And the fact that, like you said yourself, a booster might be actually very risky business, meaning that it might actually have the opposite effect. And
this is exactly what Malone and myself have been saying.
Yes.
It's about autoimmune disorder and antibody-dependent enhancement. And VIRS, which is the database for the actual vaccine injury, when you look at it, it's suggesting some of the things that would happen under antibody-dependent enhancement scenario or autoimmune disorder. So, that we have to be careful. I mean, to say that the vaccines do not cause autoimmune disorder is BS. It does create autoimmune disorder in a small percentage of the population. The problem that I have with the medical community is that they're sweeping it under the rug and not explaining the actual mechanisms on why this is happening, and being forthright to the public at large of the potential risks. That's the big issue that I have. Is it widespread? No. But can it happen? Yes. And if the Hodgkin's effect is happening, especially after booster number 3, then the high potentiality of activating cytotoxic T cells to increase the cytokines that it produces will lead to more vascular leakage. So, that's a big warning sign, especially when you had individuals taking 1 or 2 shots and they were starting to see the vascular leakage taking place. So, and then you have the myocarditis. So there's another issue that the FDA needs to, really look into is that should we be giving vaccines to children 16 and younger, especially when there's evidence of myocarditis? So there was early evidence during SARS-CoV-2 infection that student athletes in high school and college were starting to get this myocarditis through when they were naturally infected. But similar things are happening in VIRS when individuals are getting the boost or getting the vaccine, on the second shot. So I'll tell you, this people need to start paying attention to autoimmune disorder
as a consequence of these vaccines. But let's go back to this panel of senior advisors from the FDA that voted against approving the third dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech jab. Of course, voted against, but also recommended at the same time for the over, I think, what was it, over 65 or over, there was like an age over 60, yes, for the people over 60, basically. Now, the final vote was 2 people against, and basically the large majority of this committee instead voted for this choice, which goes against what has been experimented in countries like Israel, which actually didn't really gain anything positive from forcing all these vaccinations and, of course, the booster. And now they're even talking about a 4th dose of the vaccines. So, I mean, they are definitely not following the Israeli model here. And the results came in while Dr. Fauci himself was about to start an interview with the CNBC, which left him, I think, a little bit probably uncertain on what kind of propaganda he had to push at that point. I mean, Dr. Fauci seems to be very incoherent about his assertions and flip-flops all the time. What do you think now that this decision has been made by the FDA?
Well, it's going to be stepwise. You got to remember, in the United States, the early cohort group is the cohort group that they're suggesting the boosters for. So over time, they're going to come back and evaluate the data and most likely state that the younger group, let's say the 50s, from 40 to 50 or 50 to 60, will need the booster. So it'll be stepwise. So they're going to have another meeting. But you got to remember, this cohort group that they're suggesting for boosters, we're the first ones to get it in the United States, other than the clinical trial group. So, we got to keep that in mind. This is probably it's not definitive, and that it's going to be stepwise, and that more and more people will be, they'll be put into a group where they're suggesting boosters. Now, but before we get there, though, it's really important that what you stated about Israel.
Yes, it's Pfizer. I mean, let's remember, this is Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. A separate commission will have to come into place to discuss also Moderna and Johnson & Johnson boosters.
Right.
So there will be probably also some different results. Going back to you, sorry for interrupting you.
Right. No, you're right. The thing is that there's going to be an evaluation of different vaccines and how that plays into their calculus. The bottom line is this: no matter what the vaccine was given in the United States, you're going to have a drop off in titers, the number of antibodies that are in your serum. All right. So as they're dropping, they're not going to neutralize the pathogen. They're using that as the indicator if someone should or should not get a booster. They roughly go down about the same rate, roughly. Now, the neutralization for Delta after, let's say, 6 months is a little bit better for Moderna than the others, but not substantially different compared to Pfizer. Pfizer and Moderna are substantially better in terms of titer concentration than Johnson & Johnson. But that doesn't mean that Johnson & Johnson isn't adequate, isn't good enough. It just means that they're just comparing the number of titers. So we're at a stage right now, let's wait and see in terms of which other cohorts should get the booster or not. But I believe that in 2 months, they're going to come out with an announcement that they're going to suggest the younger cohorts to be getting the booster.
During the FDA virtual meeting, I noticed there was a discussion about the unaccessible excess death life ratio is unacceptable, they said. Basically, there was excess deaths required to save COVID life. There was this study, and basically they were comparing with the booster what kind of results you get, and in the end, I guess that the results were not positive, no?
Well, right. Well, that's the point that we're making, is that if you rely on boosters, you're most likely activating the Hoskins effect, or you are producing an antibody-dependent enhancement. This is the issue the canary in the coal mine is Israel and China. All right. Israel had 2 pieces of really good data. All right. One is basically saying that if you had the natural infection, your antibodies actually are more robust than from a vaccine, if you survive. Okay. So that's good. That is some evidence that natural infection is better in terms of building a more robust response if you survive. That's the big caveat, if you survive it. All right. Then the other piece of data that Israel brought up was that you're not going to have as much of a response with the booster as you would expect from, let's say, the second shot. Now, what's interesting with China is that they issued hundreds of millions of doses. I think it was like 1.2 billion doses of their Sinopharm and Sinovac. I think primarily it was Sinovac. But the bottom line is that they have a lot of individuals that have been vaccinated, but their vaccine is different. It's a inactivated SARS-CoV-2 virus. Now, by doing that, the antibodies they get are going to have the S1 and S2 subunit then versus, let's say, the Moderna or the Pfizer. The problem comes in is if it's not inactivated, you spread the virus because, it's live virus that's inactivated. And if they don't do it right, you can spread it through a vaccine program. With that said, you are starting to hear in the news about severe lockdown in Fujian province. And this famous picture of the 4-year-old kid in a hazmat suit, walking alone into a quarantine area in the hospital with their zero COVID policy. Well, if they'd been fully vaccinated over that 2-month period, so say over 60 days ago, and you're starting to see an uptick in Delta, this is exactly what Malone and I have been saying. It's going to spread through antibody-dependent enhancement. So you have it in Israel. You're starting to hear cases that have been vaccinated, right? That have been fully vaccinated. And then after 3 months or so, 4 months, they're ending up going into the hospital, right? And then you're seeing the same thing starting to happen, different type of vaccine, but you're seeing the same thing happen in China. So what Malone is saying is that there's more and more evidence to suggest the antibody-dependent enhancement theory. Basically what's happening is Delta is being created because of selection pressure of a homogeneous vaccine program. That is what's happening. And that's what I was trying to say on Mike Adams' show is that I'm about choice. I'm not pro-vax, I'm not anti-vax. I believe in choice. But if someone chooses to take the vaccine, it is a better vaccine policy in the United States and worldwide to have a heterogeneous epitope type program, meaning different vaccines for whatever the variant is in that region. Not a cookie cutter, same epitope vaccine, because what that will lead to is us being more hardwired to the original inoculation, the original epitope, the P4 epitope.
There is one thing I noticed, though, that it's in this meeting, there was the presence of, at least on paper, of some Israeli researchers. Wouldn't they have pushed their own version of things, of doing things, instead of coming up with this result? I mean, it's a kind of an unusual result.
Right. I think the dogma is what got them. The medical dogma is this: vaccine early, and then the disease will go away. But the medical community isn't looking in the mirror and saying, you know what, vaccines do cause harm. There is such a thing as the Hoskins effect. And oh, by the way, the virus is not zoonotic. It was man-made. It's a bioweapon through the DOD. You and I have talked, ad infinitum about this. So, but the bottom line is the point is that the medical dogma hasn't faced reality. That this thing is multiple receptors. This thing it was designed to do what it's doing. And they're using old medical dogma to try to box it in like it's malaria, or if it's some other, like it's, or, some other, some other type of, let's say polio, right? Malaria is really a parasitic, but I mean, the thing is that, they're trying to box it in as if it is like polio. Vaccinate everybody. Polio was natural. All right. It doesn't mutate that much. Wasn't designed to mutate that much. So it was easy to have a more cookie cutter, homogeneous vaccine program. That's not what they have here. This thing was designed to mutate.
In any case, to this week's meeting, I mean, I saw certain sources says that ultimately the panel voted 18-0 to support this emergency. Instead, now we are seeing some resistance. Of course, the libtard media want to push what was the choice of the Biden administration. In the end, you have basically said to us this morning that the decision was not final.
No, it's not final, and it's always going to be, if new evidence suggests. You got to remember, at this moment in time, it's very temporal. At this moment in time, the titers are good enough to neutralize for the younger cohort groups that have been given the vaccine.
So let's remember.
They don't even mention, what they really need to talk about is natural infection actually is better than the vaccine. But if you survive, that's the caveat though, if you survive, and you don't get long COVID. But
remember to our viewers and listeners that you are, of course, following Leo Zagami, Dr. Paul Cottrell on our weekly rundown of this week's events. And that in the end, the Pfizer booster at the moment has been recommended only for 65 or older, immunocompromised, for people who have problems of this kind. So a complete failure for the Biden administration on what was their idea, their initial idea. You think,
and it's this dogma. That's the thing is that they're thinking in a dogma that it's a homogeneous solution. It's not a homogeneous solution. It has to have a multiple pillared approach. Some of it's going to be through natural infection. Some of it's going to be through heterogeneous epitope vaccines, and part of it is going to be through therapeutics. This idea of a cookie cutter approach is the wrong strategy. And what's going to happen is that if they keep on pushing it and push for boosters, it's actually going to weaken your immune system in responding to new variants of SARS-CoV-2.
Of course. And at the same time, this week we saw the big controversy from Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj, of course, a very famous hip hop artist. And it seems like slowly, almost timidly, some people from the other side, from the Democrat, leftist, libtard establishment, are coming out in the open with some criticism of this idea of forcing these mandate vaccines on everybody. Nicki Minaj, of course, is a very famous artist. So the White House apparently called her, wanted to in some way offer a call to instruct her on what was happening. She herself, though, said in one of her talks which she gives on Instagram about what's happening, apart from the initial what triggered everything, which was this comment that she made about a friend of her cousin in Trinidad who apparently had her testicles shrinken after the vaccines. And this caused a lot of backlash from the libtard media that started to criticize her. But because she is a kind of person who doesn't take criticism very lightly, at that point, she started to react, even criticizing the Democratic Party, openly saying, this kind of thing is unheard of. And now her own fans went in front of the CDC saying, Dr. Fauci lied, Dr. Fauci lied. I mean, here we're talking about a music artist. A lot of these people who I've seen their protesting in front of the CDC look like the kind of Black Lives Matter types or leftist types. So it's an unusual turn of events that suddenly, and she said herself, there is many artists, many people in the show business that are afraid to talk. So how many you think?
I want to bring this up. Dave Mustaine, who's the lead singer and who created Megadeth, he is on tour now with their new album. And just recently, he was in Texas doing one of their legs of the tour. And near the end of the performance, I think it was right before the last song, he had a monologue. So the rest of the band gets off the stage. He's, in the center of the stage and he's talking to the audience. He's talking about the tyranny that's happening because of COVID. And I think this is another data point showing that individuals within pop culture, music business or whatever, or even movie stars, but individuals that are part of pop culture in general are starting to push back these draconian measures and noticing that, there is such a thing as COVID fatigue. And if people want to get infected, it should be their right. Someone should not tell them they can't get infected. All right. It's my body, my choice. If they want to use that analogy, I still believe in pro-life, agenda. I'm not a pro-death agenda in terms of abortion rights. But the idea of patient autonomy is paramount, and that we should be given an adequate number of information, the pluses and the minuses of taking a therapeutic, let's say Regeneron or Remdesivir or the vaccine. And if they only shine the light on the positives and not talk about the negatives, then I think they are doing a disservice to that individual that's trying to make an informed decision. And you can't tell the public then that, if you're not taking the vax, that you must be, anti-vax. Well, no. I mean, what they want, these anti-vaxxers are basically saying, I want more data. I want you to tell me what is going to potentially happen. It may be small percentages, it may be low probability, but when it does happen, what will it be and how do they treat it? And the medical community, like Sanjay Gupta on CNN, isn't willing. He's a neurosurgeon. So it's hard to become a neurosurgeon, but he's well versed in the concept of autoimmune disorders or vaccine injury. So, he can spend an hour or two on CNN to explain to the public on the potentialness of these vaccine injuries and why people can't go and sue the companies that caused the injury. See, it'd be different if the government went to us and said, you know what, these are the things that could potentially happen. You could, get thrombosis, you can, get autoimmune disorder, you can end up getting, some sort of, kidney ailment or attack of your kidneys or liver or whatever. But you'll be able to sue Moderna, or you'll be able to get health care for the rest of your life to make sure that you get all the treatment that you need. That's a different story. But when they erase the tort law and they're not telling the public what the full negative effects are, even though they're low probability, then they're doing a disservice. And what's happening is that people like myself and Malone have to actually risk our careers to be able to try to inform the public on what's really going on out there.
Now, it seems to me, though, definitely you are risking a lot because you're going against the mainstream idea that we need to keep on following what they call science, which is not really science, but it's a twisted idea of science,
right,
no?
Right.
Some kind of dystopic idea of science that we just need to follow blindly. Regarding the music business, we have had a lot of artists saying they like to have the vaccines, others who are against it. Then we had Metallica doing a show for just 500 people in San Francisco, requiring, for example, proof of vaccination at the entrance. You have instead Eric Clapton, who doesn't want anybody vaccinated in his concerts after his own negative experience of the vaccine. You just said something important, the liability. In Italy, for example, you have to sign off a paper where the state, Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, they're not liable. So basically, you are not able to sue anybody because you signed yourself off. They ask you to be responsible for your own actions by vaccinating you, but then at the same time, they're not taking their own responsibility, which is to be able to be sued in case they're offering you something that will create problems. So this is a big thing. I mean, how does it work here in the US? Do you have to sign also a paper to not making them liable of anything?
We have an act that was passed in 1986 that prevents them from being sued. So I didn't have to sign a piece of paper.
Okay, so it's
at least in New York.
Already,
in New York,
already
I did not
included, already included in the system that they are not. That's even worse. I mean, it's like you have signed off your rights for any possible.
I did get a piece of paper stating that I might have soreness in my arm, or that I have to sit in the lobby for 15 minutes to make sure I don't pass out. And, I might have, a slate fever or headache after or something like that.
We want to remind our viewers and listeners that Dr. Paul Cottrell had to take the vaccine, otherwise he will not be able to continue his medicine studies, just so we clear up that matter, because of course you did it a little bit against your own initial intention, which was to avoid it at all costs, but then you saw that you couldn't carry on your studies, and so that was it.
And that's the thing is that I did the show with Mike Adams, a week ago, and I was trying to explain why boosters could harm. They could help, but they could harm, especially if it's habitual. And the issues with the Hoskins effect. And I told the audience that I had to take a vaccine for school, and I chose the Johnson & Johnson because it was the one shotter, the logistics behind of all the other shots that I had to get for medical school too. So Johnson & Johnson, logistically, and being a one shotter for me was the best option because I had to take it. I want to make it very clear to the audience. I was forced vaccinated. All right. I didn't want to take it, but I was forced to. All right. Or you can't participate. All right. And so the same issue is going to be happening for people that are going to work. See, it hit the universities first. Right. You heard it in the news, it was the undergrads couldn't get back on campus unless they were fully vaccinated, or the students in medical school couldn't get in, continue their studies unless they were fully vaccinated with SARS-CoV-2. So, now you're seeing that, okay, now the government is pushing or signaling that, well, it's been approved by the FDA now. It's not emergency anymore. And now what you're going to do, now corporate is given the green light to push, saying, if you're not vaccinated, then you're no longer working. Or if you don't want to take the vaccine, then what we'll do is we'll shove a swab in your, up your nostril twice a week or 3 times until you do take the vaccine. So this is no different than waterboarding. Tell us the information you want, or we're going to waterboard you. Well, what they're doing now, in this COVID world that we're living in, this post 9/11 COVID world, what they're doing is instead of waterboarding us, they're swabbing us until we give in. And this is not the way the medical community should be acting. There needs to be a longer discussion about civil liberties. There needs to be a longer discussion about the Hoskins effect. There needs to be a longer discussion about autoimmune disorders.
And there needs to be a longer discussion about the DOD making a damn weapon they should have never made. And until that conversation happens, I don't think an American citizen should be getting a vaccine. Period.
Okay.
So all these people that are in the hospital saying, you know, we're overloaded and all that, you had a year and a half to get organized. You hear these cases that are in the South,
but also,
like in Georgia, saying that they don't have, but you're hearing in the cases in Georgia that they don't have enough beds or ventilators.
Also,
well, the thing is
to use ivermectin, Rejovenon was actually this week discontinued the distribution of Rejovenon of the monoclonal antibodies in Florida. Basically, I think only on political grounds. And this has happened also in other states. So we are seeing, the growing, unfortunately, the problem with COVID is growing because they don't also let you use the cures that
right. That's true. That's exactly true. You're 100% right, Leo. But the point I was making here is that they had a year and a half to get ready for another wave. There were like almost 34,000 ventilators that were on standby in New York State. 34,000. All right. And we had lots of extra beds that were put in the Java Center and extra beds that were put in Central Park. And then we had that ship, the USS Comfort. I don't understand why these hospitals are whining. They had a year and a half to get ready. So when they say, oh, it's overloaded because of COVID patients not taking the vaccine, I'm like going, you should have been more prepared.
But
by the way,
sorry, Paul, it seems like it's overloaded at times. Some people who have actually gone to these places and saw with their eyes that these places were not actually overloaded. It seems like propaganda that they're pushing.
Well, I'm taking it, but you probably have some cases that are over exaggerating the situation. But let's just take it at face value, and let's say they are at 95% capacity in the ICU or 100% capacity at the ICU. Let's just take it at face value. The point is that they should have been prepared instead of using the argument. We don't have enough ventilators. There's no reason why they can't make a call to New York and say, "Can you give us some ventilators that you have extra?" Because we had 34,000 unused.
He said that they have been working all along to arrive to this point and to bring more and more people towards the vaccination as the only solution.
Right. That's exactly the issue. That's exactly the issue.
Has exposed this media mafia. Now, apparently, she has actually gone even one step further. She showed private messages sent from reporters threatening her own family members in Trinidad, even, that she mentioned, because now she said this. So, I mean, imagine that. So now, even somebody like her, an artist, is coming out saying, I'm getting threatened by, my family is getting threatened by the media. So it becomes like, they are a mafia, a mob that is forcing something. Of course, also the other thing is not only the vaccine. The vaccine goes along with enforcing also the tyrannical idea of a vaccine passport. Now, this vaccine passport, the majority of restaurants, for example, in New York, I heard that doesn't enforce such mandate, but some do. Here in Palm Springs, they follow New York and they're doing it. In LA, same thing. Now that the governor has won and the Republicans have lost their recall attempt, the governor of California wants to enforce even more mandates. It's like they are really forcing this whole thing to go in one direction, which is to get this vaccine passport along with the vaccine, because it's a way of controlling, is a way, of course, of eliminating part of the world population, making them sick with from here to eternity, their sons, their grandsons, because once you get into the DNA, that's it. you are screwing up not only yourself, you're screwing up entire generations. Isn't that the case, Dr. Paul Cottrell?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, there are rare cases. Let's be honest here, but there are rare cases where you can have genomic integration when you have a high inflammatory response, like a sepsis response. There's been some papers that publish this genomic integration that you're talking about. It's not common. Most of the sepsis issues were in the first wave when there was very little treatment, and it was poorly managed, especially in New York. So it's a rare situation, very rare. I'm not so much concerned with the genomic integration, through human line 1 or even retroviruses. But what I'm more concerned about is hardwiring our immune system to the original epitope that we are vaccinated for. And when a new variant comes out, like V12, down the line 5 years from now, we have a lower chance of being able to fight that. And we are going to see a similar dynamic that happened during the Spanish flu of 1918.
One thing is interesting. I would like to report from yesterday's meeting of this FDA panel. Dr. Freeman, he said something very interesting regarding the vaccine hesitancy people, the people who are against still the vaccine because they're not sure of it. For example, Nicki Minaj, because she's pregnant and she is not sure of wanting to take the vaccine at the moment. She just requires more time to study the whole thing. Well, he said one thing, Dr. Feynman, I thought it was very interesting. He says that the vaccine hesitant I've met in the ER are more aware of the vaccine studies and more aware of their own COVID risk than the doctors do.
Because they did the research. Because unfortunately, the medical community has got their head up there, what, and not paying attention to the research. I'm willing to bet, the ones that are listening, live, or even, after the replays, when you go to your doctor, ask him about the Hoskins effect and if he knows about it and how this could potentially end up causing a larger pandemic 5 to 10 years later, and that you're hardwired to the original epitope to your vaccine. All right, that's showing that you're an informed patient. And if the physician can't talk you out of that mindset that I'm saying, then there is some truth to it, and therefore you have to start questioning, because the deaths aren't now. If the Hoskins effect takes hold, the deaths are going to be in 5 to 10 years, because what's going to happen is there's going to be selection pressure for another variant.
We also got good news this week in the Uttar Pradesh province region of India. India is a big continent. They administered ivermectin, and the cases went down and are nearly not existent today. The very contrary of what happened instead in places like Israel. So I think it was very interesting also during the FDA meeting, the fact that Steve Kirsch, the executive director of the COVID-19 Early Treatment Fund, who basically argued that the vaccines kill more people than saved life in this case. So I mean,
I don't know about that. I mean, I would phrase it this way, Leo. You're going to see through the power of numbers, because you're talking about hundreds of millions of doses being administered in the United States. All right. You're going to see through the power of numbers vaccine injury. That vaccine injury is going to surpass 1 million people. Some of that will be transient, benign vaccine injury. Some of it will be on the other side of the spectrum where it leads to death. We're talking about here, through the power of numbers, individuals that are going to be possibly permanently damaged here, well over 100,000, when this is all said and done. Okay. But Now, did it save people? Did, by taking the vaccine, reduce the number of people dying from SARS-CoV-2? Yes, we have to be honest about that. But we also have to be honest that it's causing injury. But it's lower percentage.
But go back to the fact that ivermectin, a whole region of India. India is a big continent. The region of India is like an American state. Saved by ivermectin. It's a fact. It's not fiction. It's a
No, I agree with that. No, I agree with that. So no, I agree with that. No, the therapeutics.
That therapeutics problems. Ivermectin might have some side effects, of course.
Well, that's why I said that. That's why I said that the approach needs to be multiple pronged. It can't be just one type of therapeutic. It's not just hydroxychloroquine. Not everybody can take hydroxychloroquine. Not everybody can take ivermectin. All right. Now, my understanding is there's a toxicity build that happens. So if you're taking it prophylactically, that's an issue. So, it's a tool in the toolbox. When you build a home, you use a hammer, a drill, a saw, right? You don't just use a saw, or you don't just use a hammer. So this is a multiple pronged approach. So a little bit of it for individuals that want to have the vaccine is prudent. For others, a therapeutic is prudent. So to say only one way on either side of the spectrum is the only way. It's the bad way of doing it.
There will be some people who say that you're talking nonsense. Some others that will agree with you.
No. I'm not talking nonsense because the thing is that it's about a heterogeneous solution. When you have a heterogeneous solution, you're going to box in the variants. When you have a homogeneous solution, you're allowing selection pressure, even if it's ivermectin. If everyone was taking ivermectin, you're going to have, and assuming that it neutralizes, you will eventually have something that pops up where ivermectin doesn't work.
That will be resistant to ivermectin.
This is the reason why the cocktail for AIDS works.
Yes,
this is the reason why the cocktail for AIDS works. It's a multiple vector approach.
It's also true that after 1 year, a couple of days ago, CDA finally advised to take large doses of vitamin C, zinc, and everything that we've been saying for since the beginning of this whole pandemic was a possible also way of preparing your system to counteract this virus. So I mean, there is ways of fighting this virus without putting the vaccine on the table. And the vaccine, sorry if I say.
So let me give you an example. Let me give you an example where the hydroxychloroquine or the ivermectin may not work as well. Let's say someone has kidney or liver issues, all right, and you can't metabolize it into an active form. Then you're left with Regeneron as a monoclonal antibody or remdesivir. And maybe even remdesivir wouldn't work because it probably has to be metabolized. So then you're going down the road of some sort of immune therapy, either monoclonal or through vaccine. So cookie cutter doesn't work, even with ivermectin. I just gave you just a reason why. That's why I keep on saying heterogeneous solutions are the way to box in the variants. It's a very simple. If you were attacking an enemy, do you attack it from the front, or do you attack some of it from the front? You flank them a little bit, and if you could get, and get behind their enemy lines and attack from the back, isn't that better? When all that's happening, yeah, it's a heterogeneous solution. It's not a homogeneous solution.
I go back though to the fact that in those third world countries where they use alternative solutions, being ivermectin, being hydroxychloroquine, being even wormwood, which is a natural solution, which I've always been talking about, they seem to have had great results. And I
agree. You're right, because they act as protease inhibitors. They act as protease inhibitors.
I would like to make an example here. We have a bunch of people at the border in the Rio in Texas arriving from where? From Haiti, which has less than 2%, 1% rate of vaccinations. They all seem to be very healthy. very much ready to invade our country, go backwards and forwards from Mexico to Texas to pick up food if they need it. I just put on the TV nowadays, the last couple of days, they've been all over the news. They're all under that bridge in their thousands. Probably a lot of them had COVID, created antibodies naturally for COVID in poor countries like Haiti. I think we made a big deal out of nothing here. A big deal out of nothing that has only favored the big pharmaceutical companies and has definitely worked against the citizens of the United States of America.
I think
of the whole Western world that are slaves of this big pharmaceutical company.
You're bringing up a great point here. There are individuals that are going to make a lot of money in this crisis. I agree with you on that. And I also think that our tolerance level with dealing with risk as a society is becoming less and less.
Look at the homeless. Look at the level, the percentage of homeless people here in California, which is a state with one of the biggest homeless populations in the USA, unfortunately. Go and check the percentage of people who got sick from COVID, and you will learn that basically it's better to not do anything and just let it go and live your life like the homeless do, without all these impositions. And actually they might have come out stronger out of it.
I think that when we had the P4 variant as the prominent variant before D61, before D614G mutation, which is where all these variants come from. If we had in our first wave, we had a more nonchalant, less lockdown approach and a more open society, we would have more natural antibodies and it would be more robust. That ties right into the research from Israel, and we would have been faring far better. The problem is where we're at right now. We have a variant that if you open up society, you're going to have a higher death rate.
Listen, we are in front of a situation in which they want to create a great reset. They want to use this whole thing to force people from the vaccine passport into the credit score system. They are basically, by saying that we need to fear the next variant, being the new variant or whatever is coming up next, it's just helping these people get away.
Leo.
These people are the ones who go to the Gala and they are there without the slaves have to wear masks next to them because they are from a lower social class. They are the slaves. So I don't feed into that.
Wait. I'm not saying to put fear in people. I am stating that the policy that we have right now will lead to a worse outcome if we continue going down this road. And that is homogeneous solutions, especially the original epitope for everybody. Okay? This is stupid. All right? It still should be choice. We should use all the tools in the toolbox, even the stuff that Fauci doesn't like. All right. And we need to open up society and not be fearful.
Yeah, I give you
there will be, but there will be consequences with that philosophy. And that the consequence is that there will be people that die. And there will be people that get long COVID, but there will also be a huge part of the population that pushes through, like D-Day, pushes through, and we will have a more robust response to the virus. And then we go after the ones that created it through a Nuremberg, trial. That's the right solution. The wrong solution is staying locked down, using medical tyranny and pushing a homogeneous solution.
Paul, you are talking about things that they have already decided that this is a world in which they are already moving towards a great reset, and they announced it right at the beginning of the pandemic openly. They have been working behind the scenes for it for years, but now they are people like Klaus Schwab from Davos just openly talked about the Great Reset. Nowadays, in Italy, this week, people are receiving a notice that, for example, gas, electricity are going up 40% because of COVID. Immediately, there was an uproar and people are, of course, very angry. So the government says, oh, well, we will intervene, maybe diminishing to 20% what is an enormous amount of money for what? I mean, the COVID has ended and suddenly we have gas and electricity that cost more. It's not because of COVID, it's because of the Great Reset that we have with this pandemic. It's because of the Great Reset that we are moving towards never-ending lockdowns, the continual taxes for fossil fuels and all this BS.
I agree with you. But the way to do it is not
the way to do it. The way to do Paul, it's not about the way to do it. This is not a word of academics or people who have fancy ideas and can save the world. This is a word of gangsters in banks that you know very well, of people in royal houses, very powerful people that owns the mind, that own the minds of the world, that own basically the global population, people like George Soros, who hang out with Nancy Pelosi at the weekend and his son. These are the people who are deciding our future. And we can't do anything if we are not going to be able one day to say, I want to fight the system and I will fight it with weapons. That's what we're going to be scared of. Eventually, that will be the only solution.
I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. The way to deal with this, when you go to to its finality, is 1776. That's it. It is a revolution, and it is a kinetic revolution. It's not an info war. It's not a discussion. It's not, having a lot of people on talk shows, giving their opinion. It is literally a kinetic event where the citizens push back on the tyranny of the corporations and of the government to protect their constitutional freedoms. It's that simple.
But there is a but, for example, in Australia, where there has been hundreds of people now just arrested for anti-lockdown protests, the situation seems almost impossible to fight when you have the military, the police, and the whole establishment.
You just got to remember that the military in the modern context, in our contemporary context, especially with COVID and post 9/11, the military is not really protecting the Constitution. The military is protecting the government, and when the government is not representing the people and upholding the Constitution, it is the right and the obligation of the citizenry to tear down the government. And that includes fighting the military. I'm very pro-American. I am against the military not protecting my constitutional freedoms. I am against when the government isn't representing the people and they're representing nothing but their own pocket and the lobbying group that they bought them. And the only way to get out of this is war. Talk is over. The problem is, Leo, is that there's not enough people in the United States that are willing to go kinetic. I really thought last year, in the middle of last year,
enough people that are willing, even in Europe at the moment. I mean, it seems like after decades of being numbed down and brainwashed by Hollywood, by the media, and by the politicians, nobody's really willing to fight.
That's right. And that's the problem, is they dumbed us down. They gave us too much GMO. They gave us too much bread and circus. They're giving us now, more holidays and universal income. And it lessens the incentive to actually question why the government is doing the things that they're doing to us. We need to reboot that spirit that we had in 1776 and fight and stop complaining. That's where I think Alex Jones is wrong. The time for InfoWar was 1990s, around 2000 to 2010. But over time, things started to accelerate, and the need to go kinetic, a kinetic war, not an info war, but a kinetic war, is starting to become more and more prudent to save our constitutional freedoms. Because if we keep on going down the road we're going, you are 100% right. We are going to have a great reset. We're going to have a new world order, a destruction of our constitutional freedoms, and we are going to live in tyranny for the next 400 years until we have a generation that rises up crying out to God for help, and there is some sort of fight, and they persevere through a lot of luck, and they win. It would be easier for us to do it than for a generation 400 years from now to do it.
To me, it seems incredible that when you go and do a poll, yes, you basically see that almost half of the Americans believe that Joe Biden vaccine mandates have gone too far. But then when you go into a recall election like the one with Governor Newsom, it was only 36%, whatever that, I mean, they kind of...
This is where I don't understand, where, there's an awful lot of people that are thinking like you and I, all right? That, that there's tyranny here and it has to be fought, all right? Hopefully through peaceful means, but I'm getting to, the philosophy that this has to go kinetic. The problem is that they're not willing to get off their butt, off the couch, and do something. And it's easier to complain, it's easier to talk to their TV, when Tucker's on or whatever, than to actually do something. This is a big problem. It's a very, very big problem within the, let's say, the pro-patriot movement. There are some people that are very active and try to move the ball forward. But the far majority of the people in the United States, they know what the problem is. They feel it, but they're not willing to do anything about it.
No, but it's becoming a sect also, because another poll showed also that the majority of vaccinated Americans are kind of telling their non-vaccinated friends to fuck off. Sorry if I use this word, but basically a research was made that proves that almost 33%, even more, of the vaccinated people interrupt any relationship with their close family who are not vaccinated, their friends who are not vaccinated. It's a system that is separating people.
Mm-hmm. We saw the same thing with, Trumpers versus non-Trumpers.
We saw
Republicans versus Democrats. There is this fracturing of America. Definitely, I totally agree with you.
Same thing in Nazi Germany when they went after the Jews. But I mean, when Adolf Hitler issued his famous card that was all about your own genealogy, if you had any Jewish background, then you would be casted out, So it's becoming a little bit scary what's happening, and these technocrats are really working towards also carbon credit cards to control every phase of our life. This is another, I think, element that will, of course, come in once everybody is enslaved to the vaccine passport ideology. Then you will have the carbon allowance card, which means you can only buy one steak a week or a month, or you can only buy certain amount of gasoline a month, or anything, of course, that produces the feared, and so pollution for this carbon tax that, of course, is going to enter our life, recording our travels, our eating expenses, and of course, even the food we eat. this is the next level, I think, where we are heading. Mm-hmm. The personal carbon allowances.
No, see, no. Well, it's that, and go back to viruses and vaccines. Moderna is going to be releasing, in short order, a one shot that gives you SARS-CoV-2 vaccine Delta and influenza.
So,
all in one shot.
Somebody here on the chat is asking me, ask your guest how he has helped resist the tyranny by getting the vaccine. I repeat, Dr. Paul Cottrell, who is a doctor in economics and is now studying medicine, was forced after almost 2 years of studying medicine to take this vaccine or either abandon his studies. As his studies are more important than his own health, well, sorry.
Well, right. Well,
made a choice. Then I mean,
right. I was forced vaxxed. I'll admit it. I was forced vaxxed. I was forced.
So,
yeah.
Criticize Paul, who is actually also doing a lot of research and has done a lot of research right from the first weeks of this pandemic. Actually, when the pandemic wasn't even announced yet, I remember there were very few people at the end of January 2020 who were talking about this problem. And
right.
That we are in a war with a bioweapon that has been released, of course, by the deep state in China. I think that you were, of course, one of the few people that were quite open about it, and you have helped a lot of people being red pill about the danger of this bioweapon. Let's also not forget one thing, and this I want to tell to all your viewers, our listeners, and everybody who's following us on all the platforms. The fact that I actually sustained the existence of this bioweapon in the first period of the pandemic probably got me in big trouble with the 75% of my audience. I lost 75% of the American audience the first few months because I said, this is a real thing. You have to fight it, but it's a real thing. If you say it's not a real thing, you are helping China get away with murder. First of all, the people who helped China, which are the deep state, Dr. Fauci and the whole lot, all the big pharmaceutical companies that, of course, came in later giving the vaccine, you are helping this whole system of criminals, substantially progressive, socialist, communist criminals worldwide, get away with murder. So I always said from the beginning this was a bioweapon, and I consistently then went on. And of course, then you invited me to your show, I invited you to mine, and we then started this collaboration. What I would like, though, to remember to all those people who are viewing us now, our shows are basically still visible on
Brighton.
On various channels, let's say, on various platforms. We have Rambo, we have BitChute. I must say, recently I was not able to upload the BitChute on BitChute any longer our shows, for example.
Are you serious?
That's very weird. Only the ones I do with you, which is really. For example, today I'm broadcasting live on YouTube. I don't care if they take it off, who cares? I'm broadcasting on Facebook. Let's see what happens. But and then, of course, we're broadcasting on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network, on Aftermath FM, and these radios on the internet that fortunately gives us also the possibility of bypassing censorship. But I remember those first few months of the pandemic in which we unfortunately had to fight with a lot of ignorant people who had the courage to say this thing didn't exist and often ended up dead because of it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's very real. It's very real.
I mean, it's ridiculous. And I lost a lot of my viewers and listeners because they were believing in all that QAnon BS. And here is not somebody who's talking to you from the left side the aisle. It's not somebody who's talking to you from the mainstream media. I'm total opposite to all that, and my decades of war against establishment can prove it. I'm very saddened that unfortunately I've lost a lot of patriots that just were brainwashed with rubbish and didn't really listen to the right voices, like Dr. Paul Cottrell, Mike Adams, Leo Zagami. And I must say that even Alex Jones at times flip-flopped in the beginning stages of the pandemic in his position.
I think the reason why he flip-flopped was because he was worried that talking about the virus being real would hurt the chances of Trump's re-election, and they would cause too much economic instability. And so I think it was a calculated reason why he played that move, to try to help Trump get into office. I think that was the wrong way to do it.
I was the president of Italians for Trump. I worked with Alex for years, and we helped Trump getting into office, and I'm very proud of it. But what happened in the last year of his mandate, during the elections and prior to the elections, I think was very stupid, especially when it comes down to the fact that we should have immediately blamed China and blamed this biological warfare attack on the United States of America and on the whole of the Western world, which of course followed also their plan for this new Silk Road, this green belt initiative, as they call it now in China, which of course facilitates only China. When we see General Milley, and this week, of course, we've seen a lot of General Milley on the media. What is the problem here? The problem is that General Milley is a traitor. General Milley is a traitor, is somebody who supports China, who basically is doing things only to favor China, and of course critical always of Russia, critical of everything that is conservative. He prefers to be woke. He prefers to. He actually downplayed the Black Lives Matter Antifa uprising of last summer, which destroyed America and created millions of dollars of damages. But he downplayed it because he didn't want Trump to bring in the National Guard. This guy is a complete traitor. Just let me tell you, he's a complete traitor. So, I mean,
he admitted to it in his book that he backstabbed the commander-in-chief and he talked to the Chinese, and giving them strategy while Trump was still in office. And this was that is like a soft coup that happened.
A lot of these lip-tad mainstream media focus on that image of Trump that, of course, once that church on the other side of the White House, on the other side of the road from the White House went on fire, he went to visit it, there was an attack, a big attack on the White House from all those protesters, you remember? That was a crazy attack. That was a real attack. It wasn't like what happened on Capitol Hill. That was a real attack. And what happened to those protesters? Nothing. Actually, amongst those protesters, there were even Chinese agents. What happened to them? Nothing. The Chinese get away with murder because, unfortunately, part of our society is weak and takes money from them. Our businessmen, our politicians, even the churches, including the Catholic Church, take millions and millions and millions of dollars from China to shut up and look the other way. But by doing that, they are supporting the Antichrist, they're supporting Satan himself. I mean, China is the most satanic country in the world. That is a fact, not fiction.
People view America as a smorgasbord, and all you can eat buffet, right? And the people out there are, just taking advantage of the hard work of, the middle class and even the poor class. And they position themselves in Congress to be able to take advantage of the buffet, and they sell, their power to the lobbying group, to foreign actors, and whatever. We need to stop this. We need, as a country, to move forward and be the country we can be. We need to clean house and hold these people accountable. And we're not, when we go to the court and the courts aren't upholding the Constitution, and you have a Congress that's not upholding their promise to the citizens that voted for them.
Even before we are only 15 minutes past the hour, still have 3/4 of an hour for our show, but we have increasing talks from people like Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, trying to censor books on Amazon that talk about COVID and other things. This is a book that has 120 pages on the origins of COVID and all the rest. Volume 5 of my confessions. I don't know for how long Amazon is going to permit the sale of this book, so please get this book.
But it's important to mention this is exactly what the Nazis did. They stopped the publication of literature that was against their own theories, their own agenda.
We never thought that we will see that happening again in the Western world, but it's happening. Nobody's
and people need to realize that people like yourself, like myself, a few, there's about a handful of people that have been covering this from day one. All right. And we all had our own, perspective on, and our own spin on how to cover it. But people have to realize these handful of individuals are somewhat the historians of this event. You and I are the historians of this event. And, when we do have time and sit down and, write the canonical of, work of covering the history of COVID, hopefully we'll have platforms to be able to sell the books, to inform the public on what went right and what went wrong. It's a big story that's still evolving. We're only in the middle of the game, of the football game. We're at halftime. There's still a lot more game time to happen. And I think that people need to be hopeful, but we need to also push back on the tyranny. And I think this is exactly what Dave Mustaine was mentioning up on the stage, the lead singer of Megadeth. We have to fight tyranny. We are seeing tyranny right now. And the picture of that 4-year-old in the hazmat suit, going right into the quarantine room, with his backpack, you know what? That is going to be the society that we are moving towards if we don't push back. I don't want that kind of society. I want an open society. I want to go back to a pre-9/11 day where all these agencies are truncated, because I think they've grown too much through institutionalization. They need to be truncated, if not totally abolished, like the CIA and the FBI. But
the FBI we have seen going unfortunately on the wrong side of history for a long time now. They seem to have been infiltrated very much by the woke group now that prefers to promote how the archivist in Langley, Virginia is homosexual, or how the lesbian in Langley has made her career in intelligence. I mean, the sexuality of people shouldn't really interest us as much as also their color of the skin, which should be completely irrelevant. But unfortunately, that's what's happening here. Going back to Governor Newsom, Governor Newsom came out of this recall as a winner. Of course, so there is Larry Elder, who has been, I must say, in a very graceful way conceded the victory, because I think that once they win, it's very difficult that we will ever find any evidence of wrongdoings. And even if we find it, they are here in California, at least in the majority. But let's see what's going to happen at the next elections. I think that Larry Elder was maybe a good candidate, but not good enough. I think we can do better here in California. The importance of California, of course, is very much the importance of a state that has made American history, that at the same time used to be the place where we got great conservatives like Nixon, Ronald Reagan. So, I mean, it's the birthplace of some great conservatives. And now we have basically Larry Elder, who said on Thursday, we need to stiffen our spines and lean into keeping people safe and healthy, which basically means that here they're gonna go on some further draconian laws to force these mandates. Doesn't he realize that this might incentivize the people to not re-elect him, because there is some elections coming up, I think in 2023. There will be, of course, a new campaign starting in 2022. But at this point, is it like they're not? Is it that the people here are really brainwashed, completely brain dead in the cities? Because I was watching the people who voted no for the recall, the people who basically are the bluish people of this state, no? And where I started to see the red areas of this state, of course, the rural areas of this state, the places where you have the real Americans. And then you have these cities where people just vote en masse for the Democrats, and that's it. Either they are frauding the whole system and it's all rigged, or either we are in front of a majority of people who at this point, sorry if I say it, Paul, deserve the very sad ending that they have planned for them.
I would spin it this way. I think that the country is somewhat equally divided in terms of policy, you know, conservative policy versus a liberal policy. And yes, you have different subgroups within that, but just it's somewhat 50-50 split, all right? So in some regions, when the count is really close, it's not hard to fake the vote because of all the dead people. They're still getting their Social Security check, or not checking IDs, or using, you know, electronic voting machines and flipping votes. So it's a combination of voter fraud and a country that is equally divided. And so I don't think that we have a 60 or 70% brain dead society. You may have a 50% brain dead society, or, you know,
Well,
maybe it's probably lower than that. But
unfortunately, we got a recall that unfortunately the recall faction didn't go that far. I mean, it was 36%. It's at least from what they said. I mean, this is, of course, a democratic state. It has been a democratic state for various decades.
But there's something unique going on in our contemporary time. I mean, you're basically a follower of news and politics and world events. You know, you followed this stuff, you know, going all the way back, you know, before Reagan, right? You know, but if you look, let's say at George Bush Jr. or even Clinton, you know, Bill Clinton or Obama, the outright lying at the press conferences is to a whole new level with the Biden administration. It's like, especially the way they handled Afghanistan, the drone strike that ended up being a complete lie. Just everything that's happening with Biden's administration is just one gigantic lie.
There is 70% of Americans who are embarrassed by Biden's failed Afghanistan withdrawal.
But it's not just it. There's one thing to just do it wrong, all right, and it's bad enough just doing it wrong. But doing it wrong and lying, that's even triple the problem, all right. So, and it's lying at the State Department, it's lying at the Pentagon, it's lying at the White House. I mean, it's like everybody is not telling the Americans the truth of what's going on.
Today, I think we have a demonstration of it with this rally in support of the January 6th political prisoners, which is a very modest rally. And it's like really nothing to do with what they have been propagating the last few days, to building up those fences again, bringing in the police, bringing in all this interest for an event that really, I mean, I've been following it since earlier today. it's not really happening. It's a small event. Nobody.
Right, it's a nothing burger. It's a nothing burger.
Nothing
Yeah.
burger. People like me, Roger Stone, and others have warned the Proud Boys and the Oath Keeper and everybody else to just stay away from Washington. And I think that these warnings have been effective. In fact, there is not really any of. I don't see any militias. I don't see any.
The thing is that the way to
not close.
Right. Yeah. The way to do the 1776 needs to be not at a rally. It needs to be a Tet offensive. You got to learn from what the North Vietnamese did in Vietnam. You do it a Tet offensive. So if you really want to push back tyranny, it has to be, asymmetric warfare in multiple locations simultaneously. And when that happens, the politicians would take notice and back off. The military would realize they can't fight an asymmetric war that is simultaneous like a Tet offensive. They couldn't do it in Afghanistan. They couldn't do it in Vietnam. They couldn't do it in Syria. They couldn't do it in Iraq. Our military isn't as strong as it thinks it is. It's very mechanized, but it can't fight asymmetric warfare, especially if it's in our own hometowns. So if you really want to push back the government to stop the tyranny and go back to a pre-9/11 day, we need to have a Tet offensive. Now, I'm for peace. I want to resolve this in a peaceful way. I want to uphold our constitutional rights, and I want to hold everyone that was accountable for causing 9/11 and this crisis that we're living in now, this COVID-19 crisis, because it was man-made. And everyone that was involved in the defense, development of this needs to be held accountable.
You are basically talking about the military-industrial complex that includes companies like Lockheed Martin, and basically you're not going to go anywhere, because it's like we have to be realistic here. There is people that are very powerful, and that the military-industrial complex unfortunately has companies that Lockheed Martin that still dictate the policies of this country. This is a fact. And like
maybe these companies have to be hit by their Achilles heel. Every company has an Achilles heel. We just have to figure out what it is. But you hit them at the Achilles heel.
And it's not only Martin, it's like every single company that is in the fold, lobbying and trying to steal the will of the people. The moment in which these politicians step the foot in Washington, D.C., there is immediately a lobbyist that comes and visits them.
But look at what happened to GM during Lehman. It went bankrupt. It went pink slipped. No, but the point I'm making is that if you have enough patriots that a massive enough wealth to be able to push down the stock of Lockheed, they would panic and start reconfiguring how they are doing things that are hurting our civil liberties. You can hit them in the pocketbook. That's their Achilles heel. But it has to be coordinated. Just like if you're going to fight something, in the United States, it has to be coordinated, it has to be asymmetric, it has to be simultaneous. With these big companies that you're talking about that are part of the biological industrial complex, right? Because we got to add biologics inside that now. They can be hurt on the stock market, and we just be like venture capitalists where you push it down and then you buy it. So if we amassed enough wealth, we would be able to push down Lockheed to a point where there would be huge economic disruption and possible failure because they may go down to zero. But you got to have enough, vultures out there pushing it down. And I would say that there is a case to be made that, like General Dynamics, like Lockheed Martin, like Boeing, that they have created, and Raytheon, created systems that are hurting the civil liberties of the American citizen, and therefore the American citizen should attack them. Now, you can attack them where their Achilles heel is. That's the economic. That's the economic pillar. So they're not. They don't have a force shield where they're totally safe. They're not. But we have to be smarter. See, the problem is you got, with the oath keepers and all that, and I don't know anyone that's really an oath keeper. So, but personally, but the thing is that, there's too many people that are just thinking in terms of just kinetic, but you also have to think of, well, you got to have kind of like a soft hit with them too. I'm not talking about info. I'm talking about economic hit, boycotting or hitting them in the market when you're doing the trading, especially if you're putting in positions that are shorting their stock in mass. Then people are going to start listening. The guy that ran Bill Clinton's Cardwell, or his name, Carville, I think his name, who ran the campaign for Bill Clinton. He said, the only person you need to worry about is the bond trader. If the bond trader is against you, you're going to lose. Well, that's where we need to start acting. These patriots need to start thinking, use the market, the stock market, the bond market, as a weapon. And when you use it as a weapon, then they'll start paying attention, because it's all about money. So that's another tool in our toolbox. That's another piece of ammunition that we can use to save our constitutional freedoms. So this industrial complex that you're talking about, it doesn't have a force shield. We can attack it, but it has to be an economic attack. It doesn't make much sense to have a kinetic attack. You can hit them economically. The other stuff, when civil liberties are being eroded and there's forced vaccines and kids are being pushed away from their parents, that's when you have to rising up and going kinetic.
I have a question here for you. The majority of the companies that today provide us with services that for some are absolutely, a necessity. One of them is the internet. Then we have, of course, food companies. We have Coca-Cola. They are all entrenched in this woke movement, in this equity, in this racial theories that they are pushing through this to basically push down the patriotism and bring this progressive world into being. So here we're talking about a world that surrounds us today, in which we simply have to go on our phone and put on our phone, and it's full of apps of people who literally hate everything we stand for. And we go and maybe get a drink, or we get any kind of food from companies who are promoting all this rubbish, supporting Black Lives Matter and all that. It's not an easy task here.
No, but we have to be coordinated. And this is the big issue that the Patriot movement has. This is the lack of coordination. Mm-hmm. If you really look at the leaders of some of these subgroups, Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, and they have their own tree pissing contest, right? There's ego, and because of ego, it's fractured and it's not coordinated.
I personally never saw these groups as any kind of serious threat to anything.
They're not. That's the problem. They're not. That's the problem.
The problem is that the FBI, the intelligence services, the government likes to play them that way. And that's why you have, just before on 9/11, you had George W. Bush saying the biggest threat is coming from our patriots, or the same thing was also said a couple of days before by Hillary Clinton. Suddenly, the biggest threat comes from the people we're seeing now, Washington, D.C., that are not really a threat to anybody. And they were not even a fact, on the 6th of January, when they were pulled into the Capitol Hill with a trap that was put together by the usual suspects using the FBI. There is still thousands of hours of footage we are not allowed to see, a lot of investigations that we are not even allowed to make, because there is the involvement of these people like Nancy Pelosi, who didn't really take in the advice that was given by even some people within the, I think even in the FBI, that probably were not aware of the trap that was being set up, who said, oh, there might be some kind of problems on the 6th, maybe you should organize a better protection of Capitol Hill. They ignored completely any advice of protecting. Actually, they invited the people. We saw it. They opened up really the gate.
They wanted to use this as a reason to try to push out Trump and then give him no shot of re-election.
And today we have, on the 18th of September, a useless situation. Also, we have a dangerous situation in the case they want to create a 9/11 kind of false flag, because a date like today could be used for a false flag. Maybe that is.
Well, I'll tell you what, and then we got to be really, we need to push back on this false narrative. They're trying to make patriots into terrorists, very similar to how the terrorists attacked the buildings at 9/11. We got to be very truthful and look in the mirror. This country was attacked on 9/11 by terrorists, but there was a stand down through Cheney and the Pentagon to allow those terrorists to hit those buildings. All right. There was an inside job. There was also a pre-wiring of Tower 7 and high probability of some wiring with this nano combustible material in the two towers, Tower 1 and Tower 2. All right. I can't remember the name of it, but the bottom line is that it was a inside job. All right. But terrorists did hit the building. Now what happened right after that was an erosion of our civil liberties, because we had a whole bunch of people scared of terrorists and they were willing to give away your civil liberties for safety. All right. Same thing is happening with COVID. They want you to give away your civil liberties to feel safe from the virus. But yet the solution, just like in 9/11, the solution that they're giving is going to make things worse. All right. And we're going to have less freedom. We have to push back and say, we are not the terrorists. We are patriots. We believe in protecting the Constitution. And Jefferson would have been on our side, not their side. Jefferson stated that if you have, I'm paraphrasing, if you have a government that is tyrannical, then you're going to have to water the tree of liberty with blood to make sure you preserve the Constitution. And that is what our generation, the X generation, Gen X, should be doing. For us to be a great generation, we need to listen to the call. And that call is to protect the Constitution and to push back to a pre-9/11 day and truncate these damn agencies that grew way too much after 9/11. But instead, what they're going to do in the mainstream media is that, the patriots are now the terrorists, and that we're going to have to, curtail them and treat them like they're, from the Middle East, and that, and that you can't give them any freedoms, and you have to watch them and surveil them and all this stuff. This is the very essence of why I was saying that this is the canonical event. 9/11 started this canonical track, and we are now with COVID, and this is solidifying the loss of our civil liberties. Now, people are spinning it in the term of the Great Reset and a New World Order, but 9/11 and COVID-19 are connected. They were orchestrated, they were real, but you can have a real event happen and still erode your civil liberties, because the main reason why these events happened was to erode your civil liberties.
Let's look like at what's happening now. For example, we had MSNBC Williams who said, I'm afraid what's happening in the Rio will be used as a distraction from COVID-19's death in Texas. Listen, idiot, the Rio, Texas events which we are witnessing are probably how we're gonna get even further to spread the COVID and other diseases that come in from all these countries. So I mean, they are completely twisting things around. They are manipulating reality.
And you know, and the thing is
today, we have
exactly.
the news that 2 of Gavin Newsom children have tested positive for coronavirus. The guy is doing all his precautions, all his mask mandates, all his tyrannical decisions, and suddenly his own children are testing positive. I mean, and so it's like we know that the further they go in the implementation of the mask mandates, the vaccine mandates, and everything else, the further we're gonna have a sick society, not only physically, because of course we're gonna be damaged physically, but also psychologically. So this is a society where we're bringing up children in complete isolation, or at school in a mask in which they can't show really the expression of their face. So basically, they are children with no with a expressionless future. It's really weird what's happening with that.
It's Orwellian. It's Orwellian what's happening. And you know, the thing is, the bottom line is this: lockdowns didn't work, masks didn't work, and a homogeneous vaccine program doesn't work. But yet, that's exactly what they're giving us continuously. Every time that there's another wave, there's going to be another wave beyond the one that we're in right now. And we got to wake up and say, you know what? Enough is enough. We're just going to live our lives. And if we get it, then we're going to have to use whatever is on the shelf to try to help us. All right. But they go and live our lives. There is no reason to keep this continuous lockdown tyranny to continue. You know, I don't believe in using I don't believe in technocracy. I don't believe in scientific technocracy telling me on how to live my life.
I think that's what is the future here, because you see, all this technology this technology is being used simply to oppress us. I mean, they offer us, of course, it's like a bit like Facebook, you know. They offer us a free service, but then that free service is basically taking all our data. It's in a way limiting and restricting our freedom of speech and deciding what we should follow or not follow. So I mean, it's definitely a nightmarish situation. We still have 17 minutes to the end of this show. You're following the Leo Zagami show with Dr. Paul Cottrell for our weekly rundown on all the latest events. And of course, another thing that has been very visible in the last week has been the cognitive disaster. Joe Biden, who doesn't seem to really get anything right, and really it's becoming kind of embarrassing. How long you think before they will not be able to handle him anymore?
He's being propped up. He's ailing. I mean, by the day, right? He doesn't walk very well if you really pay attention. He's really thinking hard to walk, especially when he's getting off that helicopter. Marine One. As long as they are willing to prop him up, he'll be in office. Now, are you familiar with John Hogue at all?
No.
Yeah, all right. John Hogue is kind of like the historian of Nostradamus, and he's been on History Channel and everything. So he was on my show just before the election, and he predicted that if Biden gets into office, that he would not finish his term, his 4 years, and that it would be Harris that ends up becoming president. I think he's right, and I think that we're probably going to see something of that regard right after the midterm election.
I mean, when I saw that the New York Times columnist yesterday said in PBS NewsHour that he thought that Joe Biden, I mean, he basically compared Joe Biden to Jimmy Carter incompetence, and he openly talked about an incompetent president. You understand that something is going on here. So the approval numbers are going down, his cognitive capacity is going down, and at that point we're gonna be left with a woman that wasn't elected, who is a criminal. I think I can say that.
But what happens if, okay, what happens, and I don't know the answer, maybe you do. What happens when he steps down for cognitive decline, for example? Harris ascends to the presidency.
Yeah.
Who becomes vice president?
No, I mean, you're gonna have basically Kamala Harris. That's it.
No. I mean, Harris ends up being the president.
Yeah.
Who's the VP?
The vice president.
Who would be the VP when she ascends?
They will probably pick up somebody. I think.
I don't know what the process is. I'm worried that it becomes Nancy Pelosi because she's the speaker.
End up with Buttigieg, with Booty Sweat, as I call him, as vice president. I mean, anything is possible. But let's focus on the fact that Kamala Harris wasn't elected by anybody, and she's not even that strong politically speaking here in California, because unfortunately she was picked up by the Biden presidency simply because they needed a candidate of color, somebody that could fit into their whole scheme. But definitely it's very dangerous to think that she's going to be in charge, because she's just another puppet, and she's even more I think with Joe Biden, we can get a break from the fact that, I mean, we can get a break because we can laugh at it. That's it. And it seems, it makes us, in a way, it makes us reassure psychological. We have an idiot in charge. Who cares? This guy doesn't understand anything. With Kamala Harris, we have an ignorant, an idiot, a charlatan, but we have somebody who is probably very much together and willing to do anything George Soros dictates up to the minimum details and execute it like a Nazi.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When I watched her speech, when she was trying, do the stump for Gavin, I'll tell you, she sounded so stupid up on stage. She made it, it's like, we got to stop these Republicans attacking us, or we're going to lose across the board in the country. And this is, the fight is here in California and all this. And just the way she was articulating, she's not a very good orator. She's not very intelligent. She doesn't articulate the argument well at all. I don't think she even knows she probably doesn't even know what the argument is. But, I think people, when they see her, they realize how fake she is.
Yeah, but I think she's a blind executioner, somebody who would blindly carry on with her mandate.
I tell you, the insiders in her campaign, and in her office, they're all saying it's a total free-for-all. I mean, there's a lot of dissent. There's confusion, chaos. She's demeaning. This is a person that's not going to make it.
Nancy Pelosi will be vice president. I mean, one nightmare after the other. I think that Nancy Pelosi needs to go to a retirement home where she can eat more ice cream together with Joe Biden. The use of ice cream was exposed by one of Trump's sons. And there was actually a whole study that made here in California on Alzheimer and the positive effects of ice cream.
Do you remember the Stephen King movie that was with Watkins? It was called Dead something. It was a dead game, or he's like a psychic, and he knew that this guy that was running for president was going to cause a nuclear war.
No,
It was
no.
dead. It was some dead something. I forgot. But this is that character. That runs for president, even though he's male, I'll tell you, Pelosi kind of has that kind of thing about her. And that if she became the president, I would be seriously worried about a nuclear exchange. I think she's crazy enough to hit the button.
Yeah, because we made a big fuss about the last few days. Of course,
she's all about getting control of those nuclear codes.
General Milley was upset, thinking that Trump will nuke everybody, which is completely ridiculous. Trump, I don't think, will mentally nuke anybody ever. I mean, the guy is a pacifist. The guy managed to actually bring North Korea in front of a peace negotiation, and he could have done that with probably anybody in the world because he's a likable guy. These people are not likable. I mean, I'm sure that you agree that Kamala Harris is a little bit like Hillary Clinton. These people are not likable. They have problems psychologically with themselves when they look themselves at the mirror, probably. They don't like themselves, even if they have achieved some success politically.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think so?
No, you're right. Yeah, I mean, the thing is Trump was very Reagan-esque, and the weird thing about Reagan was that he projected fear, right? But he was actually more peaceful than some of the previous presidents in terms of nuclear de-escalation. I mean, he signed a lot of treaties with Russia to de-escalate. All right, same thing. That's where Trump was going for his second term. In my mind, I think that there was going to be a de-escalation, not an escalation. But Trump and Reagan, they, on the surface, it was like you got to be worried that I'm going to do it. In reality, they weren't going to do it. Nancy Pelosi, I'll tell you, she's the person who would do it. She would hit the button. I think, with a cocktail in her hand, with a whiskey, with whiskey glass, and
very crazy people. Last week on Sunday, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, which I don't like at all, went on NBC stating that basically the government putting requirements on people to take vaccine is a long-held American tradition. What is your opinion on this long-held American tradition?
Wait, I missed the point here. Wait, what was the first question? Where was the first?
The question is was there ever a long-held American tradition in putting requirements like this? I never saw requirements at the federal level that impose vaccine mandates here in the U.S.
No. Okay, so the long-held tradition in America is to take risks. The long-held tradition is not to be fearful, to be exploring, to do what needs to be done, get her done, and persevere, not hide under the bed, not be scared, not, that's our long tradition. So this, continuous lockdown and this continuous tyranny from the government, this is a new phenomenon. I'll state it that it goes in line because of my age, it goes in line with this canonical 20-year event that starts with 9/11. Scare the public to erode your civil liberties, to gain more power that will lead to a world government integration. They want to weaken the country economically, and they want to weaken it through border, being able to secure the border. And by doing that, you no longer have a country.
And it seems there's also another way of weakening this country, this multi-trillion-dollar spending plan that if it comes into effect is going to basically create infinite debt for generations to come. That is,
I'll tell you, right. This is where the whole Biden agenda with spending $4 trillion in addition to the other 4 trillion that was during the crisis, and then the trillions that we spent in the Middle East over the years. I'll tell you, we cannot afford this. And this is the reason why people are making the comparison between Carter and this increase in inflation and Biden. We are moving towards all the economic problems that we had before we had Reagan. And it took a Reagan and a Paul Volcker to reconfigure the economy and have it become a growth engine again through the 80s. They are literally destroying all the growth that we've had in the 90s and the 2000s. And reasonable inflation, low inflation. Now we're starting to see, we are going to have problems with our bond market in the United States now because of over-reliance of issuing bonds to pay for policies that we can't afford or should not even have. I mean, a lot of the stuff that they're trying to fund through these, quote, infrastructure bills are not infrastructure, they're social programs. And it's just spun. It's just spun as infrastructure. We can't afford these.
Well, do you think that eventually this bill, which will actually cost probably more like 5 trillion in the end, will get approved, or fortunately we still have? I don't think it will. I think that there's going to be some Democrats that are going to say no to the 4 to 5 trillion mark. But there's going to be probably some negotiation and bring it down to maybe half of that amount. I don't know, but it's going to be more than the original phase 1 passage, because this was like a 2-phase kind of proposal for the infrastructure. So I think that the second half of it is going to be half of what the Democrats really wanted. I don't think it will completely fail and nothing will be passed. I think something will be passed that is in the tune of probably 2 trillion for the second phase of this. For the first phase, it will stick to whatever that amount was, 1.3, 1.7 trillion, something like that. No.
I mean, just the numbers that we're talking, it's just so big. I mean, think about $1 trillion here. I mean, it's like, our economy is 21 trillion. So when you're talking about $5 trillion, that is a big chunk of your GDP for the year.
In fact, I've been talking about that as infinite debt because it would.
Yeah. I mean, in a couple of years, we're going to talk about not 5 trillion, 10 trillion. 20 years from now, we're going to say 100 trillion. It's like,
well, I'm sure that the Chinese will be able to buy our debt even more easily at that point.
Well, we have to sell a lot of nuclear submarines to the Aussies to be able to pay off that debt.
Pissing off the French as it happened. Right. I was wondering if this whole thing with the backor with France it has something to do also with China being very close to France, even in the making of this bioweapon in that.
I think you're right.
Level 4. There might be something there. 2 minutes to the end of this show, so we of course put together and summarize what we've been doing today. We've been going along the main news of the week with my dear friend, Dr. Paul Cottrell. Everybody who has been following us hopefully has enjoyed what we are trying to do here, which goes on every week. It's probably from next week the only show I'm going to conduct also on the various radio stations and on a regular basis, because during the week I'm going to go back to my old activity of a writer, as it seems to be more successful, but we will definitely keep on following up on this tradition, because our weekly show is something that I enjoy very much, as much as you, I hope, Dr.
Yes.
Cottrell. And please purchase the books that make possible for us to carry on this project. If you want to also say your side of things and promote your side of things, Paul.
Well, I just wanted to say, you know, for the ones that are listening and watching the replays, it is important that we support Leo in, you know, being able to have a discussion on the current topics of the day. These are one of the most important things that could be happening. So please buy his books, go to his website, subscribe to newsletters, whatnot, but help and support Leo the best that you can.
Thank you very much. God bless you, and God bless America and all our viewers from across the world. And see you. And of course, you will hear us next week for those who are following us